Good day, my friends. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Daily Torah broadcast, a ministry of the Messianic Discipleship Institute. Remember, you can always visit us online at mymdi.org and download previous episodes of the Daily Torah podcast. Contact us and let us know what you are learning so far. We love to hear from our listeners. Today we are on day 3 of this week's Daily Torah series called Vayera. Yesterday we discussed how Abraham, knowing the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, intercedes in prayer, hoping that perhaps they will repent and be saved from destruction. Today we will look at how the messengers of God saved his nephew Lot and his family before bringing judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah. If you have your Bibles and notepads handy, get them ready, or you can come back later and listen and review at your leisure. Let's pick up the story in Genesis chapter 19, beginning in verse 9. But the men of Sodom would not listen, continuing in verse 9, and they said, "Stand back." Then they said, "This one came in to stay here, and he keeps acting as a judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." So they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near to break down the door. But the men reached out their hands, and they pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary trying to find the door. Wow, another divine intervention by a merciful God. You know, my friends, this reminds me of a story of a friend of mine who was walking alone on a dark street, and some thugs approached him. All of a sudden, this big dog comes out of nowhere and walks with my friend down the street past the thugs until he was a safe distance away, and then the dog went on his own way. You know, many times God sends his angels to intervene when needed. They are always looking after us to keep us safe from harm. Now, continuing with our story in verse 12 of Genesis 19, the men said to Lot, the angels, they say to Lot, "Have you anyone else here? Son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, and whoever you have in the city, take them out of this place. For we will destroy this place because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-laws who had married his daughters and said, "Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city." But to his sons-in-law he seemed to be joking. My friends, before God sends his judgment, he always warns us and provides a means of escape. He doesn't want the righteous to perish with the evil whose sins have forced God to bring about judgment. He is a God of mercy, but a time comes when judgment must be carried out. And sadly, the sons-in-law of Lot did not heed the warning, as we shall see continuing in verse 15. In verse 15, it continues, "When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, 'Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city.' And while he lingered, the angels took hold of his hands, his wife's hands, and the hands of his 2 daughters, and the Lord being merciful to him, and they brought him out and set him outside the city. So it came to pass, when they had brought them outside, that he said, 'Escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed.'" And then we see the encounter that Lot asked the angels if he can go to Zoar, and they arrived there just as the sun is rising. And then continuing in verse 23, we read, "The sun had risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. So he overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. And my friends, I have been to the area of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Dead Sea area, and it's desolate. In fact, you can still find balls of sulfur and brimstone there, and it's a desolate area. Nothing grows there. And then something very peculiar happens in verse 26 of Genesis 19. We read, "But Lot's wife, his wife, looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt." So what happened here? Why did Lot's wife look back when she was warned by the angels not to? And why did she turn into a pillar of salt? If we read back in Genesis, where the herds of Lot and Abraham became so great that there wasn't enough food in the field to feed their livestock, and even the herdsmen were beginning to quarrel between the two camps, that Lot separated from Abram and went towards the east. And something happened after this where it looks like maybe he lost everything. I don't know, but he ended up, the scriptures just don't tell us what happened, but he ends up dwelling in the city of Sodom. The Torah just doesn't give us enough details. But who is Lot's wife? She is not named in the Bible, but is called Ado or Edith in some Jewish traditions. She is also referred to in the book of Wisdom in the New Testament in Luke. In the book of Wisdom, which was written during the Hellenistic period and is said to be the writings of Solomon, we read in the book of Wisdom, chapter 10, verse 7, it reads, "So it was who, while the godless perish, saved the upright man," speaking of Lot, "as he fled from the fire raining down on the 5 cities," it mentions, just that Sodom and Gomorrah, but the 5 cities, "in witness against whose evil ways a desolate land still smokes." And that's true. Where the plants bear fruit that never ripen, and where monument to an unbelieving soul, there stands a pillar of salt. Now, my friends, I don't know if this is the true pillar of salt that's Lot's wife, but if you travel in that area along the roadway, there's an area that is says where it says Lot's wife, and I've been there. You go there, and there's this pillar of rock there. I don't know if it's salt, but there's a pillar there, and they claim it's Lot's wife, representational of her. But let's look at our Brit Hadashah portion for today. We'll get back to the Haftorah here in a minute, but I want to jump to the Brit Hadashah portion where we see that Lot's wife is an unbeliever. Yeshua tells us in Luke chapter 17, that's our portion for today, Luke chapter 17, verses 28 through 33, he tells us not to be like Lot's wife when the tribulation comes, and even before it comes. It says in Luke chapter 17, verse 28, "Likewise, even as it happened in the days of Lot, they were eating, drinking, buying, selling, planting, building. But on the day Lot left Sodom, it rained fire and sulfur from heaven and destroyed them all. Things will be the same on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, the one who is on the roof and his possessions in the house must not go down to take them away. In the same way, the one who is in the field must not turn back. Remember Lot's wife," Yeshua says. And then he concludes, "Whoever tries to keep his life, whoever tries to save his life, will lose it. But whoever loses his life will preserve it." My friends, as I have been saying throughout these daily Torah portions, many are called, but few are chosen. God is looking for faithful sons and daughters who love Him and His way of life more than the worldly ways of life we see in our world today. Satan tries to entice us to pursue these worldly riches and fame and pleasures, but in the end, they bring about death. Lot's wife perished because she loved the worldly pleasures she found in the city of Sodom more than living a life of righteousness in the fields with her family. The Apostle Peter tells us in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11, he says, "Beloved, I beg you, as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul." And the Apostle John further clarifies in 1 John chapter 2, verses 16 and 17. In 1 John 2, verse 16, he says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of this world. And the world is passing away, and the lusts of it. But he who does the will of God abides forever." My friends, God is looking for us to dwell with him forever. And tomorrow we will discuss what happens to Lot and his two daughters after this traumatic event that happened with Sodom and Gomorrah. Suffice it to say, Yeshua did not find 10 righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah to spare, as Abraham bequests. Only 3 were found worthy to escape the impending judgment. My friends, it is my prayer that you and your family will be found worthy to escape what is about to come upon this world in this last days, this last hour. But let's go back to our half-Torah portion. It ties into the promise of Abraham and Sarah having a son. You know, we have a couple themes intertwining here throughout this weekly Torah portion. But a similar account happens during the time of Elisha in 2 Kings 4, which we've been discussing these last couple days. Here we see the Shunammite hospitality of a woman who, whenever Elisha came through, would have him stop and eat a meal. She perceives that Elisha is a man of God, and she wants her husband to build a little addition to the house for Elisha to stay in whenever he passes through. So we pick up the story in 2 Kings 4. It says, "It fell on a day that he came there, and he turned into the chamber, and he lay there, and he said to Gehazi, his servant, he says, 'Call this Shunammite.' And when he had called her, she stood before him, and he said to him, 'Say now to her, Behold, you have been careful for us with all this care. What is it to be done for you? Would you be spoken for to the king or to the captain of the army?' And she answers, she goes, 'I dwell among my own people.' And he said, 'What then is to be done for her?' And Gehazi answers, he says, 'Most certainly she has no son, and her husband is old.' So he said, 'Call her.' And when he had called her, she stood in the door. And Elisha said, 'At this season, when the time comes around, you shall embrace a son.' And she said, 'No, my lord, you man of God, do not lie to your handmaid.' You know, she just couldn't believe. You know, just like Sarah, she couldn't believe that when she is old and Abraham is old, that she's going to have a son. So here, my friends, we have this very touching encounter, and we see how God rewards his faithful servants. Remember, Yeshua says, when we show mercy and hospitality and love towards our brothers and sisters and servants, you know, pastors and rabbis of the Most High, it is as if we have done it towards him. So I want to end it here today. and let you meditate on these words. Think about, are you more concerned about worldly pursuits or about spreading the gospel of Messiah to a dying world? Take some time to reflect. And look and take some time to do some deep reflection on where your priorities are today. Share this message with your friends and family. Post a link on your social media pages and helps us spread the gospel. We have devoted our time and our life to spread the gospel to this world. And in so doing, you never know whose life you may affect. There is somebody out there who needs to hear this message. So share it on your social media. Share it with your friends and family. Remember, you can visit us at mymdi.org. Take some time to take one of our free classes. Remember, you can download the Daily Torah schedule. You can also order our Daily Torah series of books to follow along with these teachings with. And then if the Lord inspires you, please consider becoming a monthly sponsor so we can reach more people with these messages. Just click the giving menu option or the donate button that's on the website. So until tomorrow, shalom aleichem, blessings and shalom, my friends.